former Rangers who were cadre there, and I got assigned special duty as a recondo instructor. I went through one class as a student, and then I taught one class. Then they deactivated the recondo school, and for the summer of '78, I was SD to the ROTC summer camp. And all throughout, I met, Eldon Bargewell was a company commander in
Yep.
247, and another guy named Ken Branch was commander of A
Yep.
Company 247.
Yep.
He was a major. Bill Ohl was the S3, and they were in charge of the summer camp. Ken Branch later became a company commander when he activated 3rd Ranger Battalion. But Ken Branch took me on he's going to say, if you want to be an officer, says, what do you want to go to college? I said, to become an officer. He goes, you want to do that, you should go to OCS. You won't have a break in service. It'll be better for pay. You won't lose any pay. You'll get right to it. Let's do this. He actually drove me to the education center and made me take CLEP tests, and they call them Dante's subsidized tests. And over that summer, I took a bunch of classes at night, took a bunch of lunchbox classes, and I acquired the 2-year equivalent to get an OCS. And I applied, and I went to OCS in January of '79. So that was a pretty fast track, all inspired by Ranger leaders. And Eldon Bargewell, I needed like 3 letters of recommendation for OCS. Eldon Bargewell wrote one. Ken Branch wrote one, and another guy, I don't remember, Craig Robinson, who was a lieutenant.
Sure.
He later died. He passed away of cancer maybe 20 years ago, but
Good man.
very good man. Very good man. So I went to OCS and supported OCS in January of '79.
And you were commissioned infantry officer and then went to aviation school?
Yeah, it was kind of what I like in your book, sir. When I read your book, the reasons why is it's just like when you wanted to go to the 173rd in Vietnam and you didn't get that, but that actually turned out better for you. And in my reading of it, your career was influenced and informed by things that maybe you got that you didn't really want at the time, but later became as valuable as what you maybe were thinking you were going to get. And I always, in the back of my mind, like I wanted to be a soldier, I always wanted to be a helicopter pilot. Always kind of wanted to fly. In '74, early they had the high school, the flight school, which they didn't have when I joined. But in the back of my mind, I always thought I wanted to do that. And one day in IOBC, I was probably a good Ranger, but I was probably wouldn't have been the best infantry officer because of I just didn't like being wet, cold, and miserable like all my Ranger peers did. I didn't like what I put in the thing, embrace. I didn't have that quality of enduring. I probably had it better than most soldiers. I didn't have it to the degree you guys did. But one day towards the end of IOB, and I had orders out of in OCS, they gave you orders wherever you wanted to go. I wanted to go to the 82nd. So I had to add the 82nd Airborne patch on my fatigues. I'd written a letter to the 3rd Brigade commander who wrote me back and goes, somebody said 3rd Brigade, 82nd's the best. Wrote me back, hey, you're going to be a rifle platoon leader, 3rd Brigade, 82nd Airborne. I was months away from doing that. And one day at the end of IOBC, it was my turn to carry the Dragon, right? So all day long in Fort Benning, I carried the Dragon weapon system around. And at the end of that day, I'm like, this is ridiculous. This thing it's unsuited for me. It's heavy. I'm miserable. And on that day, this is this funny story is at the end of that day, they said, okay, you guys stand by before you fall out. We were dripping wet with sweat. 2 lieutenants came out there. They go, these guys want to talk to you about Army's changed its policies. They're now accepting 2nd lieutenants in Special Forces and Aviation. There was a Special Forces lieutenant there and an Aviation 2nd lieutenant there. And the Aviation 2nd lieutenant goes, anybody wants to go to flight school, you get a flight physical and fast test this week. We'll get you in flight school immediately. The 2nd lieutenant Said, anybody wants to go to Special Forces, we'll give you a Special Forces swim test physical. You go immediately to Special Forces after that. And I had to make a choice. I said, okay. And I met with the aviation guy. The second lieutenant, this is another Ranger segue. The second lieutenant Special Forces guy at Fort Benning was a guy named Benner, Benner. He was a B
Oh,
Company Ranger,
yeah,
former Vietnam LRP
I
guy
remember
who
him.
went,
Yeah.
yeah, who went very tough as nails, who went through OCS ahead of us. And I think he was just awaiting Fort Benning or something like that. But yeah, after that formation, he came and got me. He was about my size too. He goes, hey, Buffkin, what are you doing? You come Special Forces. I'm like, nah, I don't really, I want to go, I want the chance to fly, and he says, no, come Special Forces, Special Forces, Special Forces. There were a bunch of guys in our platoon who had been ex-enlisted Special Forces that went that way, but yeah.
So you got accepted flight school, and you hung out there at Benning for a while before you went to where, Rucker?
Rucker, yeah.
So you went, your second lieutenant went to Rucker, and then where was your first assignment in aviation?
It was in the First Armored Division in Einsbach. I was in an attack. I was an Aero Scout pilot, section leader, and platoon leader in an attack helicopter company.
And what were you flying? What
OH. I was
58?
in, yeah, I was. So at the end of flight school, they had a thing called the Aero Scout track where you were trained to be an Aero Scout. It's really good, a lot of tactics. And I also went to the Cobra course. And so I was trained at Fort Rucker in the OH-58C and the G model Cobra. When I got to First Armored Division, they had A model 58s and S model Cobras. So they go, okay, it's quicker to get you transitioned backwards into an A model 58 than get you forward transition to a Cobra. So I flew 58. And I had a lot of, at that time, if you flew, because a 58 is so simple to maintain. I mean, I flew quite a bit. I made pilot in command early, was pretty interested. At the end of but I hated aviation at that time. I hated the First Armored Division. They never did op orders. They never did, they had an expression, kick the tires, light the fire, brief on guard. It was very, and at that time, as you recall, sir, and Fred, the Army killed a lot of people in aviation because they didn't have mission briefing, didn't have discipline. It was kind of like very cowboyish. At the end of my Germany tour, I had orders for infantry advanced course. I said, this is ridiculous. I'm going to try out for a Delta Force. I went to a Delta Force recruiting PT session in Nuremberg. And the recruiter came to me and he says, hey, I passed a little PT test. And he goes, hey, you're an aviator. He goes, have you commanded a company? I said, those companies are commanded by majors. He says, well, to be at that time, to be a commissioned officer in Delta, you had to have 12 months of company command. You had to have a 4-year degree, which I didn't have yet. And you had to completed the advanced course. He goes, you got none of these things. He says, can you go back, try to command a company, complete your college degree by correspondence, complete the advanced course by correspondence? And I said, no, I'm not doing none of that. And then he says, this is 1983. He goes, have you ever heard of the 160th? I said, no, I hadn't heard of them at all. He goes, they support us. He says, you should volunteer for them. And then after the advanced course, about halfway through the advanced course, I got like a little buck slip in my inbox, and it said, hey, 160th's coming here. We want to talk to you. And so that allowed me, after advanced course, I went to 18 months bootstrap at Auburn. I assessed during that time, and my next flying assignment was within the 160th. This is kind of, Fred will appreciate this because I know where Fred had served, but like when I went and assessed at 160th, General Lou Hennies was the commander, and they fly you, they give you a board, all that stuff at the end. He goes, at that time, they didn't wear any shoulder patches or anything. It was basically a secret unit. He goes, how'd you hear about us? And I told him how I heard about it. And he goes, that's impossible. They wouldn't have told you that. I said, yes, sir. They told me that. So then I spent three years in the 160th. Then after that, one of the ADCs, CG Marsh, who I'd also met at Fort Lewis, he said, hey, what do you want to do next? And I said, hey, I either want to command an infantry company or command an aviation company. And at that time, they were fielding Apaches, and I lined up with the fielding of Apaches in the 101st.
We'll come back to your aviation distinguished service here. Let's go back to the battalion. And you know, when we ask you the question about what were you most proud of, wow, that quote that was on the wall, that you would remember that to this day, is fantastic. Tell us more about, you know, just the brotherhood and what you were proud of in your time in the battalion, you know, and was there a turning point in your time in the battalion where you said, yeah, I want to be a professional soldier?
Yeah, a couple of turning points is, and I describe it. I even have it here, and this is the hand-to-hand combat script that Fred had me memorize. And it actually starts off, good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Sergeant Clydebacker of B Company. And I don't why. So I'm like, at this time when I did this, but when I was picked to be on the hand-to-hand demo team, what the heck Fred saw in me as a short shit little specialist to be on think about that. He had the entire company to choose from, and he picked me. And the fact, like I told you, I never memorized anything in my life. I remembered my first general order and basic training. I remembered the max range of an M16. But later in my career, in my life, and I have 3 master's degrees, but I'm not one of those guys, but a lot of memorization. The fact that Fred, think about this. Fred says, you memorize this and you'll be the narrator. Just think about that. That's a turning point. And I probably wouldn't have happened, you know. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
this is the other one.
What does that speak to? You know, what